Hello and welcome back to Unperfect with Alexi. This is the perfect place for unperfect people to talk with their hands. If you're watching this on video, you can tell that I got a new microphone that is hands-free and the sound probably sounds better. So if you agree, let me know. If you don't. I'm mentally fragile right now. But I'm very excited for this podcast episode. Kind of. I'm feeling a little bit anxious, honestly, because we're talking about something that I don't think I've ever actually talked about on the internet before, like in a long form version. And it's about mental health, my mental health specifically. And I'm sharing this because, like the motto goes, that I always say, if it helps one person, it's worth it. The goal in me talking about my mental health issues isn't for it to be like me. Oh, yeah, and a little bit more me. No, I want you to listen to this and be like, oh my God, I feel so much less alone in my struggles and my issues and the things that I'm experiencing. Like, I thought I was literally going nuts. I thought I was actually insane and was on the verge of checking myself into a mental hospital. But now that I've heard you talk about it, I feel better. So that's the goal today. The first thing I want to start with is sobriety, because I know that a lot of you have followed my sobriety journey. Maybe you found me on Instagram or TikTok talking about, like, here's things I've learned since I quit drinking. So if you haven't heard that episode of the podcast that I did back in October of 2023 on I Quit Drinking, I think that was the title of the episode, you should go listen to it because it still reigns true. Like the fact that I was using alcohol as a coping mechanism, that I did not have a healthy relationship with alcohol, that alcohol was the thing I revolved my life around. It was my idol. It was my idol. I'd be like, where are we going? What are we doing? Who are we drinking with? Like, tell me more about the booze. What can I buy? I mean, I was just like, every weekend I was drinking a lot. So I cut out drinking for, my goal was to be forever, but I realized that that wasn't a sustainable thing for me because I'm low-key orthorexic, which is like you have an obsession, which is something I'm going to kind of talk about later in this podcast, which is like OCD. I have notes in front of me because I have a scatterbrain also. But I quit drinking for, I would say, like 8 months. And then it was, I believe, like August of this last year, 2024, that I decided, you know what? I'm going to have a margarita and I'm going to tell you why. And there's a reason why I haven't shared this update on social media yet, because I felt like it deserved a longer form explanation. And that explanation is, I had a friend who, she was on a similar journey with me with alcohol, where she didn't have like the best relationship with it either. It was a coping mechanism. It was used in a way that it just was unhealthy. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be clear. Alcohol in general isn't something that is healthy. And if you're saying you're drinking for the health benefits, you have been mistaken by big alcohol. But I do think that there is a way you can have a good relationship with it. So her and I were both sober. We were sober sisters, sober queens. And then she went on a trip and had a glass of wine. And she said that it was such an amazing experience. Like, it just felt right. That glass of wine in the moment. And I always wanted to be that person that was like, I could go to Italy and have like a glass of wine on the Italian countryside and just be totally okay with it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like that's exactly kind of what I want to do. Well, then she said that a few days later, she was like, well, I already broke that promise to myself about drinking, so fuck it, I'll just have a whole bottle. And I'm like, oh my God, that is exactly where I would be. That just, it resonated so much in that conversation and her experience that I was like, I don't want to be that person who puts the strictest boundaries on myself that says you can never touch a glass of wine again, or else your sober counter is done and you should feel like shit about yourself. You should feel ashamed of yourself. You just have to start over. And now that you've been talking shit about alcohol on the internet, which I still think everything I said is true, you just look like a hypocrite. And I'm like, I don't want to put myself in that tight of a box to where, you know, if I do decide to have a glass of wine somewhere and you see me out, that you're going to be like, oh, what a lying two-faced hoe. What a Bitch. I don't want to be like that. My goal in the very beginning was to be able to get to a place where I had a good relationship with alcohol and myself, where if I wanted to have a glass of wine, I would, and I could stop after that. And so I am extremely happy to say that now, a year and 2 months after I originally quit drinking, that I have a really good relationship with alcohol. Over the summer, like I said, to round this out, I had a margarita at my friend's house and I had like half of it. And I was like, honestly, the thought of getting like buzzed or drunk or like to the point where you like lose motor function, I am not at all interested in even feeling that at all. I think the closest that I got to even having a buzz was when I was at that same friend's house and I had like 3 ciders over the course of a 12-hour period. And then the next day, I didn't even feel buzzed, by the way. But the next day I woke up and I was like, I feel like literal shit. Like I even threw up later that day, like around the 24-hour mark after, because my body just was like, this is disgusting. And I felt spiritually like I put myself back in a place that I did not want to be. And so I was like, you know what? I feel like that was a coping skill that no longer serves its purpose. And I think my intentions going into that, like that was in a different phase of my life. Like I felt like I was kind of backpedaling in something that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm so happy and blessed that I'm at a point now where I can look at situations like that from a different lens and be like, oh, yeah, I definitely like had more ciders than I would like to that night because of this feeling or this emotion that I was feeling. And be like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that again because I don't like the way that made me feel. But I see the difference now is that I'm not chained to this box of like, oh, you drank and you felt like shit the next day, so that must mean you're a piece of shit. That equates to you being a piece of shit. Like, I'm not at that place anymore. Like, we went to this new restaurant. It's like a little upscale restaurant in my area that just opened. And we went to their soft launch. And my husband got a beer and they had like some like type of specialty cocktail. I drank one that night. I went, had a cocktail with my dinner, and then I was like, that's great. That's literally all I needed, because the next day I didn't feel like dog dirt. I didn't feel like garbage. I got the taste of it, but then there was no buzz. There was no like, oh my gosh. And I know some people are like, what's the point? And I get it. I totally get it. And I wish more places had mocktail options. And I do think that when I go out, for the most part, I will be drinking mocktails, especially if people have like mineral mocktails or mocktails that are like good for you. Because alcohol, like honestly, it is kind of pointless to drink. And see, I feel like a hypocrite right now because I've talked so much shit about alcohol on the internet, and then I'm also saying like I can have a drink if I want to, but then also I'm going to probably drink more mocktails. Anyway, it doesn't matter what you think, what the person listening to this podcast after you thinks, what your mom thinks, what your grandma thinks, what you and your best friends are going to share in the group text about this, because the only thing that matters is that I have a good relationship with alcohol now. I don't need it to go out and socialize. I don't need it to be a good friend. I don't need it to be a good time. I don't need it to show up to a party. I don't need it to function. I don't need it to enjoy myself. I don't need it to enjoy myself. I don't need it for a Saturday night. I don't need it for a Friday night. I don't need it. But also, if I want to have one cocktail, then I can. And I'm just so happy that I am in a place now where I can say that and that I can do that and still also know that alcohol is not the best for me and it's not going to be something that I'm revolving my life around anymore. But giving myself the freedom and the flexibility, if I go somewhere and I see a really interesting cocktail on the menu, that I can give myself the grace to try it. And know that I probably won't want another one because I feel like I've outgrown that season of my life. So that's where I am with my sobriety. With the orthorexia thing, to circle that out, I grew up in a household where dieting was very normal. It was very common. In the bathroom of our house, we had all of these dieting books, you know, like as your mom or your dad or whoever in your house. I don't know. This was probably just my house. But there would be all these different diets. Lose weight in 21 days, lose 5 inches around your waist in 6 seconds. You know, all of these quick weight loss dieting books. And that really set me up with a bad relationship with food. So growing up, as I got older into my late teens, early 20s, I feel like I've tried every little diet in the book. I went vegan for a little bit. I've done keto, did Advocare, tried carnivore for a couple days. Like, just have tried all of these diets. But one thing that I realized, which ties back into alcohol, is it all boils down to what you can sustain and what's going to be healthy in your lifestyle. It's not putting these rigid boxes around yourself and saying, I can literally never have a sweet again. I can never have a carb, you know, or else it will take me out of ketosis. Like, that's so much pressure to put on yourself. I am a firm believer of the 80-20 rule. Like, if you 5 to 6 days out of the week, you're eating really good, you're prioritizing protein, vegetables, and fruit, and then on the weekend you have a piece of cake, eat the fucking cake and enjoy it. Don't punish yourself. I hate that. Like, coming from somebody who I used to punish and shame myself, and I feel like I'm the hardest on myself. It is so nice to finally be in a place where I feel like I can enjoy the indulgent things. Or I can find a way to make something that's indulgent be a little bit more healthy. That's why I've started cooking more too. If you guys have seen, or you guys have followed me for a while, or you've known me in real life for a while, you know that I was never a cooker or a baker or anything like that. My husband, we call him Daddy Riley because he is the chef in the house. He made dinner. He would do it every night. But then I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? If I want to eat as healthy as I want to eat, then I'm going to have to cook. If I want to be able to figure out ways to have healthier cake, cupcakes, goodies, treats, whatever, I'm going to be the one that has to cook. So that's what I started doing, and I found a lot of joy in it. Also, removing my fixation with alcohol has helped too, because I'm like, well, I need a hobby now, and so cooking has kind of taken the place of that, and that's really nice, and my family benefits from it too. So that was a lot to digest, but something else I want to talk about is OCD, because I did not really realize that I had OCD until it started taking over my life. And I do want to preface with this. I have not been formally diagnosed with OCD. I will say that I have OCD tendencies. And those were especially exacerbated after I had kids. Like, after I had my oldest son, he is 5 now, I developed this crippling anxiety of heights. And it was so weird to me because it triggered in the Hudson Yards escalator in New York. If you know what I'm talking about, this escalator is extremely long. So I was on a girls' trip in New York, going up this escalator. I, for some reason, thought, I'm going to look down. I looked down and I couldn't see the ground. I immediately, palms drenched, clenched onto the side of this freaking escalator and just looked at the step in front of me, full blown having a freaking panic attack. When we were done shopping at the Hudson Yards Mall and we had to go back down the escalator, I stepped on the platform and I looked down and I couldn't see the ground. I'm like, no way. So you know what we did instead? We took a glass bottom elevator down. Everybody I was with was like, that's worse. And I'm like, no, I can't do this escalator. And side note, I've always had a weird thing about escalators. I don't know what it was. I don't know if something happened to me at some point in my life, or that if I did something to myself with an escalator, or there was something with a past escalator life. I don't know. I have a weird escalator phobia. I will ride them, but it's like, when you're at the airport with your luggage and you're like trying to get all your body on one step, like it stresses me out unnecessarily. And for what? Literally, for what? But after I had my first son, that exacerbated that. So you know what I thought was a good idea? My cousin lives in Spokane. So we went to Silverwood, just her and me one day, just an adult's fun roller coaster trip. And I thought, the best way to get over this newfound fear of heights since I've had kids is let's go on that one ride that you go up to the very top and then it drops you. I was like, that would be a great idea for me to just get over my fear of heights. No, I was literally palm sweating, having a freaking panic attack the entire way up. I had my eyes closed and I looked when we got to the top. I'm like, oh my God. And then we dropped and I was like, okay, I will literally never do that again. I mean, pat on my back, I guess, because I did. Because I could, and I got over that fear in that moment. But yeah, that's probably not the best way to reach my fears. And then like the next week was when, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was that kid who went on the ride, that same exact ride, and then he like fell out of it and died. And I was like, that's scary. That's really scary. So anyway, that was my first like, ooh, something's weird postpartum. So then I had my second son 19 months after I had my first son. And that's when the postpartum OCD tendencies really kicked in. Like they were really bad. Like intrusive thoughts over and over and over and over again. I didn't know where they were coming from. And I need to preface with this. It wasn't until like 5 years ago that I even learned that not every thought that crosses your mind is real. Like I used to think that if a thought popped in my head, that must be truth. That must be absolute truth. And I think it was the holistic psychologist. If you don't follow her, you should. But I think it was something that she said. She was like, look at thoughts that come in your mind like clouds in the sky, how they just pass. She's like, you have the option to what thought, what cloud that you're going to hold on to. But for some reason, I felt insane because every thought that popped into my head, especially if it was a negative one, I felt like I needed to grasp on it. And it was really hard for me to let go of certain thoughts. And it was like weird thoughts that just didn't serve my life at all and that I knew weren't true. Like it was so, like even talking about it makes me feel like anxious and kind of like emotional because it just feels so far removed from who I am and who I know I am down to my core and who I want to be. And like, I would never do these things that came into my head, but like these thoughts were coming to my head. And so I'm sitting here thinking like, am I a bad person? Like, I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to hurt other people. Why am I having these thoughts? Like, why are these thoughts coming into my head? Like, why are these fears living in my head? And why can't I just let go of them? Like, I had thoughts that were unwanted. They were persistent. They were like, there was never like any urge to act on them, but I'm like, I felt nuts in my head. Like, why are these thoughts here? What purpose are they serving? And I really like, it was actually one of my friends who was like, girl, that's OCD. And I'm like, what? I just thought I was going nuts. But there's something to be said about like when you're experiencing something in your body, in your mind, not that you want to like live under a label, but having a label to it kind of detaches you from being it, from being like consumed by it. So I've had recently a lot of people messaging me about acne and OCD, and they're like, honestly, like, I don't know what's going on with my skin, but I just kind of want like a diagnosis so I can just feel a little bit more at rest that like that there is something that this can fall under. And so the same thing I felt with OCD, like when my friend was like, that's classic signs of OCD. I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. And it kind of released the pressure of like, why am I feeling this way? Why are these thoughts coming in my mind? Why is this happening? And I was like, oh, let's just label it and put it in a little envelope and like put it back on that cloud and let it float away. I still have certain thoughts that come into my mind that I literally, like God says, like take every thought captive and give it over to him. Like I will have intrusive thoughts come to my head, and then I will like, my initial like brain wiring is like, let's hold on to this. Let's hold on to this because why are you thinking this? Why is this coming up? Why? There must be something wrong with you. And I literally now am like, I rebuke this in the name of Jesus. Get away from me, Satan. Like whenever I have an OCD thought, that is the first thing after I am become mindful that I'm having this OCD thought. The first thing I will say when I become mindful is, get away from me, Satan. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And it helps. It helps. I do think that there is so much to be said about our brains and how they're wired. And especially if we are just kind of living in autopilot. And I mean, it has to do a lot with habits, right? Like if you have these habits in your mind and you're used to doing something one way, it's really hard to change those. It's like the neural feedback, right? Like if you're looking for a red car, you're going to see a red car. If you're looking for bad things happening, it's going to happen. If you're used to having negative thoughts and how you handle them, like that's going to be how you keep doing it. So you have to break that cycle. It's like generational trauma. You know, if you were yelled at as a kid, you're probably going to yell at your kids unless you break that cycle, which is something my husband and I are trying to do right now. But I think when people think of OCD, they think a lot of like hand washing or like being afraid of germs or like touching the doorknob 3 times so the house doesn't burn down. That is a form of OCD. But the OCD tendencies that I felt is more of the like obsessive aspect of it. And I think if I'm going to be completely dead ass honest with you guys, 2024 was an extremely hard year for me mentally. And I also read that it takes a woman 3 years physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally for your hormones, your body to bounce back, quote unquote. I say that very lightly because I think our lives completely change after having kids. But it takes 3 years for our body to regulate after having kids. And so I had 2 kids back to back. And so I'm like, let's just double that time. But coming out on the other side, not completely out, you know, I'm still, I don't know if we'll ever be to a place where like, oh, I'm totally healed and I'm perfect. I don't feel like that at all. But I do feel like I'm enough removed from it now, or I have enough information about it now, or I've changed enough things in my lifestyle and my diet about it now that I can see it with a third-party perspective and see it a little bit more clearly and detach myself from the obsessions and unwanted persistent thoughts and the anxiety that came with that and like the feeling like something's wrong with me. I also started doing EMDR therapy, which if you do not know what EMDR is and you have complex trauma or you have PTSD or you just had a traumatic childhood or you have something that you just are really battling with, I highly, highly, highly recommend looking into EMDR therapy. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So the way that it works is when your eyes move back and forth, if you can watch this on YouTube or on Spotify, you can see what I'm doing. But my eyes are moving back and forth, left to right, following a finger. If you're doing it online, they have a ball on the screen. If you're doing it in person, my therapist, she has like a tool, gadget thingy. But some people do it back and forth. But what that does is there's something about your eyes moving back and forth when you are thinking about a traumatic memory that essentially helps your brain take the cog out of the wheel or file those papers in a filing cabinet. Imagine a really messy filing cabinet where you look at it and you're just overwhelmed. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. Something about the EMDR helps those memories start to file. So it takes you from I'm in fight or flight, just looking at this filing cabinet, to, okay, it's filed away. I feel a little bit more calm. Not that I am going to completely forget about this, but I am no longer in that fight or flight feeling where my heart's racing and I have all of these feelings and just yucks and these little yuckies. So it's really interesting. EMDR has helped me so much, and it's helped me a lot with the trauma and the things that I've went through, self-inflicted or things that have happened to me growing up. I think, you know, if you have something in your life that you're like, wow, I must be the only one going through this, I can promise you, you're not. That is one of the biggest things that therapy has helped me with, is my therapist, when I go in there like extremely ashamed of something that I've done, or experienced. My therapist is like, she always starts with, I just want to let you know, this is not the first time I've heard this. Like, this is actually extremely common. And I'm like, Carrie, you made me feel really good right there. I recommend finding a really good therapist to get you through life. I'm actually a firm believer that every single person on the planet needs therapy. If you don't think so, sorry, I do. I think every single person has been through something extremely hard. I think every person on this planet has been through something that they do not want to talk about. I think unspeakable things have happened. And you know what? If you are one of those who grew up and you're like, wow, I actually had a really good life and I don't think that anything negative has happened to me and I just, everything has been great, screw you. I'm just kidding. But like, you're the minority here. And there's probably something in your life that you are avoiding or you don't know. Because we're all messed up. At the end of the day, we are all human beings who don't know what we're doing. We were placed on this planet and we're meant to find the meaning of life. And we go through our life differently. We go through life based off who we were raised with, who our parents were, our socioeconomic status, our life experiences, our trauma, who our friends were, what foods we ate. Every single thing that brought us to this point where we are right now in this moment and in this second was from all of those past things that have happened. I almost lost my train of thought there. And see, this is where the like, oh my God, I need this to be perfect thing comes in. Because I'm like, wait, I've done this spiel a million times because that's like one of my core beliefs. That's one of my core values. It's that everything that you've been through has brought you to where you are right now. And that's what makes you innately unique. That's what makes you innately human. Like, nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just doing the best we can with the knowledge and resources we have at the time. Did you get that? I said that really fast. We are all just doing the best we can with the knowledge and resources we have at the time. There are things that I have done in my life that I look back now at from 28-year-old Alexi lens, and I'm like, wow, I really wish I would have handled that differently. And I know that that version of myself at that time who made those decisions didn't have the information I do now. And that actually, wow. That was one of the cool things that my EMDR therapist had me do during an EMDR session one time, is she had me, while I was looking back and forth, watching this ball with my eyes, she had me go give my husband, he's walking out. I feel like I'm kind of doing a therapy session with you guys right now. She had me think about young Alexi who made bad decisions, had me sit with her and give her a hug and say, you're safe now. You're okay now. I'm with you. Bad decisions don't make you a bad person. And I don't think I've ever sobbed as much in therapy as I did in that moment. There's something so powerful about meeting a younger version of yourself who was destructive and didn't know what they were doing and didn't have resources and didn't have support and didn't have knowledge and it was just surviving, just in survival mode. There's something so empowering about meeting that version of yourself with the version of yourself that's a little bit more healed, has a little bit more knowledge, has a little bit more life experience, has a little bit more resources, just a little bit, because we still have a long way to go, right? But just meeting them with grace and being like, you're okay. It is okay. We made it out on the other side and life is good. Things are fine. I'm here now. I'm here with you. It's like future, it's reparenting your inner child and meeting them there. Because I think at some level we all have needs that have been unmet. And to round out, I've said round out so many times in this episode, but to round out, number 5, to round out this episode, I 110% believe that mental health stems, our mental health stems from all of those things that I was talking about. They stem from everything that we have been through. And I am a firm believer / refuse to believe that we are chained to the labels and the diagnosis. Like I said, on one hand, yes, I believe that having a label, having a diagnosis can be so helpful to start organizing your thoughts. But also, when we have that label, we have that diagnosis, it is up to us to heal. We can't continue to live our lives blaming everything that we do moving forward on what happened in the past. We have to honor what happened in the past. We have to look at it from that lens of, like, this is kind of the cards I was dealt at that time, but I have a new hand now. And I'm going to take everything that I've learned from that experience and I'm going to choose to be better. I'm going to choose to do better. I'm going to choose to try new things and make myself uncomfortable in hopes that I never put myself in an uncomfortable position again. In hopes that I can make something of my life more than what my parents or my ancestors did. I'm a firm believer that you don't need all of the money in the world to make progress in your life. I think it starts with your mindset. I think it starts with what you're eating. And I mean, not just food, but what kind of content are you consuming? What are you doing in your day to day? How are you taking care of yourself? What kind of news are you watching? Who are you interacting with? What kind of conversations are you having with them? Everything that you intake in your body, what you hear, what you see, what you say, that all is ingrained in your DNA. It becomes ingrained. Like, have you ever watched something like a scary movie and then go to bed and then you have a nightmare? Like, that lives in your psyche. That lives in your subconscious. And so I think that it's really up to us to heal and to be better and to make choices and to, yes, say bad things have happened to me in my life, but I am ready to move forward in my life. I'm ready to take full accountability and responsibility of my life and make better choices, make better decisions, change my lifestyle, change the things that I am consuming, change my diet, lifestyle, exercise, like everything in order to optimize who I am. I heard my entire life that mental illness runs in my family. I did a whole podcast episode about this. Mental illness runs in my family. I think that's the title of it. And especially last year when I was having those really severe like OCD tendency thoughts, I kid you not, I was so afraid every day waking up just with this fear that I was just going to one day snap and be schizophrenic because my great aunt, cousin, whoever in my family had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. I was afraid that, just because close relatives of mine have anxiety and have been on anti-anxiety meds for their entire life, that meant that I was next. I was afraid that because a close family member of mine showed bipolar tendencies, that meant that I was next. And just hearing that over and over again, that could be you next and you're just genetically fucked. I don't subscribe to that narrative. I think that genetics do play a factor, and I think genetics can exacerbate, make issues worse. But I'm a firm believer that we have all the tools and the resources necessary within us to not agitate those demons, to live a better life than the people before us because we chose to. And maybe you want to call me delusional. Maybe you want to call me toxically positive, but I don't care. I would rather live in a world of toxic positivity where I'm like, no, we are not defined by who came before us or the traumas that came before us or these lived experiences or all of these things that were meant to pull us down. Satan uses things for evil, but God uses them for good. I refuse to live my life in a negative, depressing way because of all of the things that have gone wrong. I choose to hold on to the hope and the goodness and everything that has gone good in my life and continue finding ways to make my life better and healthier and grow. And, there's a phrase that I've kind of adopted that's in every situation, you're going to take an L, but you can either take the loss or the lesson. And you know what? I choose every single time to take the lesson because taking a loss is painful, right? But taking a loss doesn't teach you anything. If you can take a lesson out of even the worst situation, you're going to be better off. If you can find a silver lining in the most depressing thing you can think of, then you're at least going to have 1% of hope to hold on to. And I think that's important. And I think that that is what we need in society. We need 1% of hope, because that's the bright light. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. Imagine you're in this dark cave, if you're someone like me who needs a little bit of imagery, and everything around you is just so negative and depressing and dark and gloomy, and it's just sad, and you feel like there's no way out. But imagine you get this one beam of light coming in. You're going to have hope. Okay? And I know not everybody on this podcast is familiar with Jesus, but to me, that's who Jesus Christ is. It's that hope. It's that positive. Like, even in the worst case scenarios, God is that beam of light who comes in and gives you hope in the darkest situations, on your darkest days. His word, just holding on to it, grasping it for dear life, just believing like, God, you can pull me out of this mess. I don't know how. I'm just a mere puny human who doesn't understand much. I'm just trying to figure out why humans even exist and why we're on this planet and what the meaning of life is. I have no idea. I just feel like I'm in the ropes. I'm in the day-to-day, but you know what? I'm just going to hold on to whatever your purpose is and trust that you have a plan. And I'm just going to be your faithful servant and do whatever you want me to do. Just lead me and guide me. Give me the words to say, the thoughts to think, the actions to take, and I will be your servant, God. And I'm just going to have hope, and I'm going to have faith, and I'm just going to pray that you will take me where you want me and use me how you want to use me. And I feel like that in itself just gives me so much empowerment to keep going on in my day-to-day, in my life. Because there's so many things, again, guys, that can weigh us down, especially if you have the genetic component, especially if you have traumas and triggers and PTSD and things actively happening in your life that are so extremely hard to get through. Hold on to that beacon of light. I promise you, there's always a silver lining. Always. Okay? So anyway, we've talked about a lot on this podcast today, and I think I'm going to wrap it up because we are coming up to about 45 minutes almost. So we talked about a lot about mental health today. We talked about sobriety, OCD. We talked about spirituality, which I'm super happy. I've never really had a full in-depth podcast about spirituality on here before, which I would like to do a little more in-depth one about my faith and my relationship with God and that. But then also triggers, therapy, understand. Actually, that'd be a really good episode to do about understanding your triggers. I don't know if you guys had any nuggets that you got from this that you were like, oh my gosh, that was really good, or I can relate to that, or you made me shift my perspective, or maybe you even disagree. Please send me a DM on Instagram. My Instagram is at Alexi McKinley. It's the way my name is spelled. I try to look through all my DMs, but sometimes it gets overwhelming. That's something that I'm learning with my mental health, is how to overcome the overwhelm. But I would love to hear from you. You can also email me, hi@aleximckinley.com. I think that the best way that we can grow this podcast is by building community in this. And if this episode really struck a chord in you, I invite you to share it with a friend. Maybe somebody who is struggling or needs it, or just feels really alone in life. And if you think of somebody while listening to this, just send it to them. Send it to them. But I would love to connect with you on Instagram. I don't know if TikTok's being taken away, but my @ is the same on both of them, at Alexi McKinley. And yeah, I'm really excited for where this podcast is going to go in 2025. This is my 3rd year doing it. I started it in 2021 as a postpartum mom who just felt really lonely in my journey of entrepreneurship. And this podcast has started and morphed in so many different ways. But at the end of the day, I think it's just being open, honest, having those raw and real conversations about the things that nobody wants to talk about because it feels painful. But we know, you and me, that if it helps one person, even just one, then it is worth it to talk about. I'm more than willing to throw myself on Front Street for that, because I know that at the end of the day, we can only help each other by being honest with each other and being open with each other and using our testimony for good, using it to help other people, even just by talking about it. And I'm sure that me talking about this, the stuff that I've talked about today, when it comes to mental health or sobriety or OCD or orthorexia or intrusive thoughts or anything like that, I'm sure that this will help one person, and I hope it does. So if that's you, please let me know. Also, one thing that I wrote down on here that I did not say was dermatillomania. If you are somebody like me and you love picking your skin, I encourage you to look up dermatillomania. I looked up the definition of this. It is known as skin picking disorder. Hello, I definitely have that. It's a mental health condition where a person has a persistent urge to pick their skin, often to the point of causing damage. It is classified under the category of body-focused repetitive behaviors and is closely related to OCD. I definitely have that. Like, I obviously with my acne, like I want to pick it and like relieve it and make it feel better, but I also pick other things, my cuticles, my nose sometimes, like, and a lot of it is boredom or anxiety or, just to get relief, but it scars. And the impact of it on here, it says that it is visible skin damage, which is scab, scars, or infections, emotional distress, shame, guilt, or frustration. I've definitely felt that. And then avoidance of social situations to embarrassment. That has been me. Possible causes: neurological factors, dysregulation in areas of the brain related to impulse control, emotional triggers, anxiety, depression, or stress, or perfectionism, a need for smooth or perfect skin. Definitely felt that too. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging. Here's some treatment options that they want to give you. Cognitive behavioral therapy, that's CBT. It helps identify and change thought patterns that lead to picking. That is what I'm in as well with EMDR. There's HRT therapy, habit reversal training, which teaches alternative behaviors to replace picking. And then dialectical DBT, behavioral therapy, useful for managing emotional triggers. They say some medications prescribed to SSRIs to address underlying anxiety or OCD symptoms. I personally, you guys kind of know how I feel about medications. I think that they are needed to some extent, but I think that if we can get to the root cause of the trauma or the OCD or whatever is causing us to want to do that, I think that is going to be a lot more helpful in the long run than a short-term medication. But here's some self-help strategies if you're on that train with me. He said, keep your hands busy. Use fidget toys, stress balls, or start doing crafts. Create barriers, like wear gloves or cover mirrors during trigger moments. That's a good idea. I need to take that advice. Skincare routine. Focus on healing and soothing the skin, avoiding harsh products. I'm on that right now. Track triggers. Keep a journal to identify patterns and emotional triggers. That's really good. And then lifestyle support, stress management techniques such as mindfulness, meditation, or yoga. Engage in hobbies or activities that reduce idle time. So if you're bored and you pick your face, welcome to the club. We're in this together. Let me know if you've experienced dermatillomania, because that is my word of the week, I guess, where we're going to do a little bit of an educational deep dive in there. But I've definitely experienced dermatillomania and the skin picking that comes with it, and that's great. So we're in this together, guys. But anyways, thanks for coming back, listening to the podcast, and I hope you have a fantastic week ahead. I have a really special guest on the podcast for next week. She is another fellow acne-prone sister, and I'm going to be really embarrassed if for some reason it falls through, and I've hyped you guys up for this. So we're just going to pray in Jesus' name that it does not fall through, and that we are going to just have the most amazing podcast episode with this other skin acne influencer that you guys probably have heard of. So love you guys and hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Mwah! Goodbye.